welcome to our 151st CG seminar, which of course is also webinar approximately number 30. And today we look at higher education and the pandemic in East and Southeast Asia. And many of us feel that East and Southeast Asia, coupled with a small number of European countries, are the countries that have best handled the pandemic overall. That it's noticeable that in East Asia especially, populations understand the need for social responsibility, things like wearing masks and maintaining social distancing protocols as required by government and by authorities. People have less trouble, it seems, following those protocols than they do in some Western countries. And the disciplined way in which the higher education systems have managed the pandemic also from the outside looks to us impressive, and we think we've got perhaps something to learn from all of that. But because my colleagues from East and Southeast Asia are good critical scholars, I'm sure they will find things wrong with their national and institutional responses to the pandemic. So we look forward to hearing, if you like, both sides of the story. Today we've got with us Zaini Azman from Malaysia, Aki Yonezawa from Japan, and we look forward to being joined by Wenqin Shen from China, from Peking University. We're still waiting for Wenqin to come in on the connection, struggling to establish that sort of as we speak, and we may be able to bring him in later in the webinar as expected. So we're counting on that happening. If not, though, I think we've got two great presenters to keep us engaged in these very important issues. Let me quickly run through the web protocols for you. Some of you will have heard this before. To those, I apologise for the repetition. You know what the drill is. First, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted online on the CG website in due course. And in due course usually means within a couple of days. A transcript of the chat will also be posted. Now, the protocols during the session. Please keep yourself muted unless you have been asked to speak or ask a question. There's no need to have your video on during the webinar, and there's something to be gained sometimes by turning it off. That can help everyone. But please turn on again when you're asking a question. We recommend that you use the speaker view facility in Zoom so you can more clearly see who is talking when that's happening. To ask a question, use the chat function. Develop your question there in written form. And at the end of the presentation part, the end of our speakers, I'll then select the questions that we're going to engage in the webinar. Generally, it's a good idea to ask your question in the chat early. You're more likely to be picked up for a direct question in the session. And when you're invited to ask a question, please unmute yourself, most important, and also switch on your video and state your name and where you are from. Okay, let's pass to the main part of today's session. Zaini Azman, we're delighted to have you with us for the first time as a speaker in our webinar program. Zaini is Professor of Higher Education at the Faculty of Education at UKM in Malaysia. That's one of the leading research universities in Malaysia, and Malaysian universities, as some will have noticed, are moving up the global research rankings. She's also an Associate Research Fellow at the National Higher Education Research Institute, IPPTN, and a Governance Board member of the University College of Yayasan Pahang, UCYP. And she's currently serving as the President Chair of the Malaysian Society for Research and Higher Education Policy Development. Her full bio is on our website. I won't go further with it, and I'll invite Zaini to come in at this point.
Hi, Simon. Good evening, everyone. Greetings from Malaysia. Am I presenting now, Simon?
You are. I mean, go ahead, Zaini.
Right. Okay. So I will begin by just briefly introducing the context of the higher education system in Malaysia, because that's the background of how things actually worked during the COVID-19. So basically, both public and private higher education, including polytechnics, state-owned higher education institutions, under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Higher Education. So for the public higher education, we are centrally regulated. In terms of crisis and disaster, we have not been affected much by great disasters except for the haze and floods. But we are, like any other higher education institutions, are immune to financial crisis and political storms too. But these have not in any way totally crippled the higher education like COVID-19 has. So a little bit about the system about during security and crisis. In Malaysia, we have the National Security Council, which is a federal agency under the Prime Minister's department. And therefore, during COVID-19, that is the only body that actually makes decision for the whole country. So in this sense, all private or public higher education, if it is the decision by the National Security Council, we just had to follow it. That is, to ensure uniformity in line with the objectives of safety first, national safety first during disaster or crisis. So now next to, what's really happened. I'm not going to go into very detail of what happened, but I'm just going to say that I have, this is based on Dr. Doria's and mine's, my paper, which is going to be published soon. But we have broken it down to 4 phases. The onset is when, it all started. Universities will just, take the, we're just telling people that to stay safe and to look after yourself. But when the showdown started, when the PM announced that movement control order started on the 18th, then that's when sort of hell broke loose, where the universities were waiting for the Ministry of Higher Education to issue a direction whether what do we do with the students? So the more he decided that students should go home or remain in campus, they decide. However, that created a lot of chaos, because that actually made the movement of people were out of control. So then they came back and said, okay, students need to stay, and the government subsidized all the meals and sundry items. And somehow the ministry also prohibited all digital courses and learning, except for those who are already on open learning mode, like the Open University and so on. So that somehow made the university stop all the courses, all the academic programs at that time. However, the ministry then retracted its earlier instruction on teaching and learning by stating that those universities that offer courses fully online are allowed to implement e-learning, provided that they can guarantee that students have access to the internet and the lectures are ready. This is to ensure that students are, particularly those in the rural areas, are protected, within the framework of equal opportunity and non-discrimination and so on. So now, next phase is acclimatization phase. So during this period, higher education then began to revise our calendar year, introduce different types of SOPs, mandated online teaching and learning for all courses and evaluation activities. And even we provided funding to students, especially for digital devices purposes, subscription and so on. Then as we move on, the government through MOHI initiated many operational guidelines and provided even lots of aids, especially to those needy ones, pocket money for subscription and so on. However, towards the end of Ramadan, where it's a big celebration and it's a long holiday, then what the government did was to initiate operation to send all the students that they forbid from going home, and they move students back all to their homes through strict coordination with the help of the Royal Malaysian Police Force, local authorities, and the Ministry of Health. So basically what higher education did was to actually just go on with the flow of the direction from the national security and from the government. Then the Prime Minister announced the recovery MCO period, which is from June, and it has been extended until the end of the year. Higher education started to resume universities or activities in the universities following the stringent physical distancing SOP by the ministry or the government. However, a few students were allowed to come back for face-to-face. And these include postgraduate students who are in research mode, those required to attend laboratories, workshops, special equipments for research, final year students who are asked to carry out clinical work, practical work, and so on. Final year students who do not have access. I will tell you sometime later, some of the issues that we had with online learning is that some students do not have a conducive environment for teaching and learning. So the government decided that those who do not have that are allowed to return to campus as early as July the 1st and to use the infrastructure in the university for online learning. And then special needs students are also allowed to come back to get face-to-face guidance, especially those with learning difficulties. So higher education were also advised to implement staggered returns of staff to campus, as well as allow staff to work from home. So for the next semester, higher education are to be in operation from 12th October, but all institutions are to carry out open learning. Now, sorry. Right. So if we are talking about a model for Malaysia, I bravely come up with something like this. I think basically we are coordinated by the government. The response has been coordinated by the government, and the government set up movement restriction, contact tracing, border control, cluster and spike prediction, and fighting misinformation. And universities had to do the same thing when we had lots of questions about misinformation from the students. So with communication and from the government, we adopted policy and new SOP as set by the government. So basically, I would say that the universities at that point, during MCO, were very reactive, safety first, support and hear the government mandate, and they come up with new rules and regulation because most universities did not have, sort of risk or crisis SOP prepared earlier. So they moved from routine decision-making to day-to-day decision-making, try to understand the consequences and actions if you were to do A or to do B, and basically they just followed established protocol. Now later, through communication and data gathering, then they started having baseline data, how many students did not have internet, how many students come from the B40, which means the underprivileged one. So they developed task force, deal with different groups differently, different discipline differently. This is when they get a little bit of autonomy to actually, create decisions or decision making and on their own. So during this stage, they drive decision making using data that they have, they collect then. And then they access financial help because a lot of money has been used for cleaning the universities and providing, initial meals and things like that for the students. And of course, the most higher education had problem with IT infrastructure, and they needed to forecast, the means to actually develop better, because online was already stated to be on until December. And then later, again, with communication and consultation, they got to the stage where it's the new normal, where they plan for operational continuity, which is starting soon in October, develop certain or own plans this time based on their own concerns. For example, private higher educations have a lot of concerns about overseas students because they depend a lot on these students as revenues, as enrollment. And of course, some universities started doing, looking at the ripple effect of COVID-19 for next year, financial implications, and as well as, how do they create a safe ecosystem in October. So this is when they realign their strategies, mostly strategies that they have set up before will not work now. A lot of universities, as I know, realign budget because they're going through a lot of issues with finance. They had to look into their basic infrastructure again to ensure academic continuity. And of course, a lot of SOPs, particularly for those first-year students who are coming in to register and to do blended learning, and for those who need that clinical and practical experiences or teaching and learning. How am I doing with time, Simon? Shall I stop there?
Zaini, it's been great outline. I think we are getting to the 10-minute mark, so it would be good to wind up soon. Yeah.
Right. So if I can stop there, I have a few more slides, but I can do that later when we have time. I think that should be it.
Thanks, Zaini. That was really, really well done. I think very interesting. Wenqin Shen has been struggling with his PC, but his smartphone has made the connection successfully. So really good to know that he's with us, and he will be able to speak next from Beijing. Wenqin is an Associate Professor of Higher Education at the Graduate School of Education at Peking University. He's been a visiting scholar also in the Department of Educational Policy at Wisconsin-Madison. And his research concerns research training systems and doctoral education, history of higher education, internationalization, and related fields. He's also one of the editors of the journal Higher Education. Wenqin, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Simon. Can you hear me now?
We can.
I'm very sorry that
well.
my computer did not work. I used June's several times, it was, but this time the computer did not work. I don't know why. So, but luckily that I can use my smartphone. So I will show slides for me. And my talk will be about the impact of colonial COVID-19 on Chinese higher education and lessons learned. And in the introduction, Simons proposed 5 questions for us. Firstly, does the East and Southeast Asian experience of the pandemic in higher education, which has played out in distinct cultural and political context, has lessons for other parts of the world? And I want to say something about that. And secondly, what's the appropriate government policy? And in this session, I will talk about China's policy in governance of online learning. And thirdly, there are stellar examples of individuals, institutions handling of the pandemic. And I will tell something about Tsinghua University and Peking University's response to this pandemic. And fourthly, what are the students and faculty saying in East and Southeast Asian countries? In this session, I want to share some interviews with faculty members and students about, especially about the experience and expectation of student mobility. Lastly, I want to say something about what we can learn from the Chinese experience. And the next slide. So in the process of Chinese universities' response to pandemic, leadership from the Chinese Ministry of Education and other government departments have played an important role. This is especially important for some local colleges and universities with insufficient organizational capacity. First of all, the Ministry of Education has unified regulation on the policy and time for the return of college students in different universities. On February 4th, the Ministry of Education issued guiding opinions on doing a good job in the organization and management of online teaching during the period of pandemic, and made especially 9 measures for the suspension of class and online teaching. And the document point out that online teaching during the epidemic period will be conducted in a way of government-led, university-based, and social participation. At the same time, the central government has also played an important role in providing free online courses to the public. The Ministry of Education organized 13 online course platforms and technology platforms to provide free online courses to the public. By February 2, 2020, the online course platform organized by the Ministry of Education had more than 22,000 free courses. On March 13, UNESCO released a distant learning solution to the world, recommending 27 learning applications and platforms that are freely available worldwide, and 3 of them are from China. These include icourse.com, Alice Dindin, and Lamoyun was selected. In addition, the student return policy can be adjusted flexibly at any time according to the development of the pandemic. There are more than 200 million students in China. As the pandemic is gradually brought under control, some students have been arranged to return to school. By May 14, more than 100 million students have returned to school to study, accounting for 40% of the total student population. And also, according to the expected arrangement in June 2020, graduates of universities in Beijing will be arranged to return to school to hold graduation ceremony. However, due to the temporary outbreak of the new current pandemic in Beijing Xinfadi, the return to school policy for graduates was cancelled, and only a small number of students finally participated in the ceremony. And secondly, I want to talk about the online education and online seminars in China. Due to the impact of the pandemic, schools in many countries around the world have closed their campus, and about 100 million students worldwide have started online classes. Among the college students taking online courses, the size of college students from China is perhaps the largest. As the May 8, 1,454 colleges and universities across the country have launched online teaching. 1.3 million teachers had offered 1.07 million online courses in China. A total of 12.26 million courses have been offered. Finally, a total of 17 million college students participate in online learning. I think maybe this is the largest and longest online education experiment in Chinese history. It can be called a revolution. It provides a completely different, but maybe not always good, experience for teachers and students. And it also changed many teachers and students' perception about online learning. The Ministry of Education's Higher Education Information and Teaching Method Innovation Teaching Committee conducted a questionnaire survey and received feedback by nearly 6 million teachers and students from more than 1,000 universities. The survey results show that more than 80% of teachers have confidence in online teaching and are willing to continue online teaching after the pandemic or mixed teaching method. At the same time, different webinar has sprung up in China. Researchers from different disciplines, different communities had hold different lots of webinars, and characteristics of scholars as an invisible community are more obvious than before. Some webinars are open to the public and have a great impact. For example, the Western Education Development Online Forum held in August attract more than 3 million audience. It's also worth noting that the lectures and international academic exchange of international scholars have not been interrupted by the pandemic. On the contrary, there are a lot of international scholars lectures held by different universities during this time. And also, many local universities made full use of online conference platforms and invite international scholars to give online academic lectures. This displayed the dominance of elite universities on international academic resource to a certain extent. Although the outbreak of the pandemic has a great impact on universities, it also provides an opportunity for the implementation of large-scale online education. Regarding the effect of online education, Taiwan's evaluation may be inconsistent, but one thing is certain: it has changed many teachers' traditional perception of online education. Some teachers who were skeptical of online education before began to actively use online education. Education companies also recognize the huge potential of online education. It's foreseeable that online education will be greatly developed in China in the future, and blended teaching method will be more popular. And thirdly, I want to talk about the impact of the pandemic on student mobility. The pandemic and changes in international relationship have also had an impact on international mobility of college students. But how large of the impact is difficult to estimate. Albert once stated that while very difficult to predict, it's quite likely that the number of Chinese students going abroad to several of the key receiving countries will slow or even decline. But according to the recent survey, most Chinese students have not changed their plans to study abroad. Recently, an online survey was conducted among parents across the country, and a total of more than 4,000 questionnaires were received. Most of the questionnaires were concentrated in big cities. And among the response, the survey results showed that 18% of parents want to send their kids abroad currently. So, and also our small scale interviews also show that some students were unable to obtain visas due to the impact of the pandemic and turned to stay in China for postgraduate studies. But they still hope to eventually study abroad. Some students choose to stay in China for PhD. In addition, some students who originally hoped to study in the United States switched to studying in the United Kingdom and other countries. A survey conducted in the UK in February this year showed that the number of Chinese students applying to study in the UK has increased by 1/3. And in the fourth part, I want to show how Chinese research universities respond to the pandemic. And I want to use the case of Peking University and Tsinghua University. During the pandemic period, universities in China successfully respond to the challenge of the pandemic on the whole. Here, only the case of Peking University and Tsinghua University are used to explain. Here we show how research universities deal with pandemic challenges in 4 aspects: scientific research, teaching, social service, and international collaboration. On February 17, Tsinghua University successfully started class as scheduled, and almost 4,000 courses were successfully opened online. At the same time, Tsinghua University also shares its online course with some universities for free. These courses are called clone classrooms. Students from other universities who join the clone classroom can log into the system together with Tsinghua University students to listen to the class. So in the clone class, students from the two universities attend class at the same time and have the same teaching materials and the same teacher. In terms of scientific research university with plenty by Peking University and Tsinghua University are actively engaged in in research related to the COVID-19. For example, Xie Xiaoliang, a scientist in Peking University, his team have been involved in antibody drug research on the third day of the Lunar New Year. Their goal is to find neutralizing antibodies from the blood of convalescent patients. Another example is Zhang Pingwen's team of Peking University collaborate with China Mobile to complete the pandemic risk assessment and suspect key case detection based on the trajectory big data. During the COVID-19, research universities such as Peking University and Tsinghua University sent medical teams to Wuhan to provide medical assistance, embodying the social responsibility of elite universities. During this year, more than 400 medical staff from Peking University arrived in Wuhan to provide medical assistance. And this pandemic will inevitably affect international collaboration and exchange. But Tsinghua University and Peking University still use online tools for international exchange and maintain the international academic networks. On April 24, on the occasion of the 109th anniversary of Tsinghua University and UNESCO jointly host a special conference on the theme of Global University Special Dialogue, University Online Education and Prospects under COVID-19. University leaders from around the world, including MIT, Yale, Princeton, and also Imperial College London, joined the meeting. Also, Peking University also used hold regular online meeting with different foreign partner universities. So what we can learn from the Chinese experience? I want to say three things. Firstly, I think the first important inspiration is that state capacity is important, especially when dealing with emergencies such as COVID-19. China is the most populous country in the world, and its population density is also very high. There are 113 cities with a population of over 1 million. In such a country, facing a high-risk infectious disease like COVID-19, it's impossible to deal with it without strong state capacities and organizational mobilization capacities. Secondly, facing the challenge of COVID-19, we have to rethink the attributes of public and private goods of higher education. Facts show that it's beneficial to emphasize higher education as a public good. There is a big gap between infrastructure and financial income of Chinese universities. But during the COVID-19 period, the Chinese government has invested a lot of money in university to solve the problem of online learning and online education. Research universities such as Tsinghua University provide free online courses to other universities and even provide clone classrooms so that other universities with poor condition can also enjoy high quality online curriculum. Since the beginning of this year, like other universities in the world, Chinese universities are also facing financial difficulties. However, due to the public nature of universities and the special status of university teachers, universities will not take measures to fire their faculty members to solve the financial problem, which will guarantee the rise of university teachers. In other words, although public universities have many disadvantages compared with private universities, public universities have also some resilience and advantage compared to private universities during the COVID-19. Lastly, I want to say that compared with traditional teaching and academic communication models, new forms of communication, such as online learning and online teaching, will have unique advantages. I think they have a very big potential in the future. Maybe will bring a new evolution in higher education. So that's all. I think I use my time now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wenqin. That was a very interesting and valuable presentation. And I must say, I agree with you in relation to the public character of, the Chinese response and that being the preferred operating model. I mean, I think the pandemic is a common problem across the world, and yet the national systems have responded to it very differently according to their political culture and their state policies. We're seeing a major differentiation between systems in the way they've handled it. I mean, in Europe, we just compare Germany, which has responded in much the same way as China in sustaining the universities as having a public role, a public contribution during the pandemic, seeing them as an asset to be mobilized and maintaining their financial base during the pandemic period, with the response in the market-based systems in the English-speaking world, where it's been left to the universities to manage themselves and their financial position and their enrolment, and they've been encouraged to stay open when perhaps they shouldn't have, to sustain their student numbers and their income. Very interesting, and I think we'll draw the lessons from on a comparative basis as time goes on. Our third speaker, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Aki Yonezawa again to the webinar, the CG webinar. Aki has been a consistent, persistent participant in our webinar series. Aki is one of the world's leading scholars of higher education. He's the professor and vice director of the International Strategy Office at Tohoku University. He's got background formerly in several other Japanese universities. He originally was a sociologist by training, I think, but he worked for a period early in his career at OECD. He's done a great deal of comparative research on higher education, and he's particularly focused on the question of world-class universities. Aki, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's really great pleasure that I can contribute this seminar by sharing the experience of the Japan and the East Asia. And let me start from my slide. This is actually the website of our university in June. And at that time, we are still in the middle of the infection increase among all of Japan. At that time, this is important for the university to have the clear message, so that we show the president message to that we are dealing with you, and also we are trying to promote that we are contributing to the research, and also we are trying to provide the proper information to the student to support, not only for the learning, but also for the finance and the life and mental. And then the proper information about COVID, what kind of people are now facing with what kind of a trouble. And then the event. Of course, we also have lots of webinars and try to be connected to the international world. And the Japanese case is not exactly the best case in East Asia. Actually, probably the worst case in East Asia as to the infection. So the China is the best, and the Taiwan would be also the best, and then the South Korea in the middle, and then the Japan is the worst. And why it is so? It is quite simple that we are probably the most soft approach towards the control of the social behavior and also the university. And we are relatively lucky because our academic calendar starts from April. So this means that we have a spring vacation in March. So at that time, we requested the close of the K-12 school first. But actually, this was relatively not influential because it was the time of the spring vacation. and the university also. So then we did have a problem to start the new academic calendar, but gradually we had the first wave, and then the second wave, and now we are still struggling, but gradually we are much more used to the so-called new normal life. And then the last month, we started the re-entry of the international students. It's a very small number at this moment. And then, but it is also true that we are the first East Asian country that experienced the replacement of the Prime Minister yesterday. And our policy is to make a balance between the human life and the economy. Means that if we have a hard landing policy, our human life will be safe, but maybe our economy will be there, and it will be dead. So then we try to make a kind of balance on that, and this is our strategy. But to be honest, from my point of view, probably the most other East Asian countries are much more successful because they made a very hard landing from the beginning, like Taiwan. And then their economic, and including mainland China, the economic damage is relatively small. And the Japanese one is relatively big. And this is a very big issue for us. So that maybe we are probably the human life and economy will be the one of the possible solution for that. And then the impact of the responses, we can say that the upper side is relatively good, and the lower side is we have some problem. So we are relatively good at utilizing university as a public good to contribute in medicine and science and technology. And we are relatively good in job placement of the graduates, teaching, learning, student life, so. And relatively problem on admission and enrollment. And then the internationalization, we have a very, very fundamental structural problem still. And what we did for the science, medicine, science and technology is that actually the researchers, including Tohoku University and the Hokkaido University and others, are really contributing of the policy making of the health strategy. And what we try to do is to make a kind of very detailed survey of the cluster, so that if I found somebody who is infected, we ask that person that what kind of people he or she met contacted within the last 2 weeks, and then we identify the possible suspect, and then make the limited capacity of the PCR to those people. So that we are criticized that the number of the PCR testing is relatively small compared with other countries. But because of that, we have relatively effective way of and a unique way of the approach based on the scientific contribution. And the other important function of the university is that we have a university hospital, and those university hospital is the last stronghold of the cutting-edge medical care. And the very big problem of this university hospital is that they face the drop of the income because they cannot make ordinary operation and the medical care in order to make a room for the emergency medical care for the COVID. And then we also have a sudden increase of the users of the learning management system in terms of computer sciences. And many universities, including Tohoku University, explains that we have a local, the kind of nationally based learning management system developed by the Japanese industry. But these are faced with the overflow of the capacity because it is not supposed to utilized by all of the students. So then it was easily replaced by the global capitals such as the Microsoft or the Google. And that this is a very big the problem maybe, but at this moment we are relatively somehow used to that. And then the job placement, we have a very strong tradition to make all of the final year student of the bachelor and master towards the company, and this is really to some degree it is good for avoiding the unemployment of the youth. And what we know at this moment, so it is still better at this moment compared with the times of financial crisis in 2009 or the tsunami on 2011. So at this moment, this year, the graduate student, the final year students somehow find a job, except for the international students. The international student already had an advantage, a disadvantage before the pandemic. But this became more serious, partly because of the Japanese companies are trying to recruit the international student in order to accept the inbound student, the tourists, and those people don't come. And then also the Japanese company tend to utilize it is not really good, but international student or graduates as or the workers as a buffer of make a balance of the supply and demand of the labor market. And as to the teaching, what we found is that gradually we started from the online, and which is really successful. But now from the second semester from October, we are now 80% will move to the face-to-face or at least the branded, the hybrid model of the combination of the face-to-face and the online. Why? Because there is some the very big the complaints from the student. First to the tuition fees, and this is not as serious as the US, but we also have some the discussion on this. And then much more on it is a mental one that the students, especially the freshmen, the first year students are facing with the difficulty to get into the school community, university community. So this is one of the tweeted one. And then some people they argue that we should postpone the enrollment, or the Minister of Education actually requested strongly that the universities should start the face-to-face, although the many universities are facing concern of whether we can avoid the infection or not. And then the government and the universities are trying to support the student because they are facing with the financial problem because the ongoing big economic downturn. And then this is much more serious for the international student. And so we are trying to give the cash handout, including the international students who are facing the difficulty on it. And then we are trying to make a kind of flexible measure to keep the international student. But still, we have a very big issue. And so nationally local, we need to support learners with difficulty, both in short-term and long-term perspective in the new age of digitalization, and then maintain the develop and knowledge economy, including the private providers of the higher education related industry. So the university is no longer the kind of isolated industry, but much more related to the much more digital knowledge industries. And the Japanese knowledge industries are really, at this moment, not that strong as the other countries. And then the securing job for further student study opportunity for the higher education graduate this year is okay, but next year we will have a very big financial problem, the economic downturn. So it is not really promised for the new students, current students. And then the co-work with the local communities. This is our challenge, but. Can we do it alone as one country? It is obviously no, so that we need to connect with the international community. And then globally and regional, we need to contribute to the recovery and the innovation through the science and technology, and seeking the new mode of the internationalization of the higher education, so that we, in case of Tohoku University, we cannot go out, but still we try to make our campus international by making the virtual connection through the online at this moment. And then the regional collaboration is necessary, and everybody wants to do that. But at this moment, partly because the geopolitical reason, not only between the US and China, but also for the South Korea and Japan, it is not really working in a national level, but much more actually done within the grassroots level of the academics and the students, youngsters. And then finally, the setting up the unique scenario, but how? This is a very big issue for us. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Aki. That was really comprehensive and very interesting. All three of you have given us great perspectives, rich with information. And as a result, we're close to the end of our webinar time, but we've got time for a couple of questions. And I'd like to bring in David Law with the first question. And I think we'll follow David with, just a minute, Sang Feng Miao. So David first.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, colleagues. Excellent set of presentations. My name is David Law. I'm Academic Director of Global Partnerships at Keele University. The thing that I would like to ask from our Chinese colleague, Wenqin, is about the ways in which the changes that have been introduced in online delivery may impact on transnational activity. We know that the Sino-Foreign Joint Institutes are now a major part in terms of numbers. They may be minor still in terms of percentage against Chinese HE as a whole, but more than 100,000 students are studying in one form or another of these joint institutes. At the moment, the foreign partners cannot deliver online. There are quite strict rules about quality assurance and the need to engage in face-to-face teaching. Do you think that there will be changes in the way in which we operate? This is obviously one example of the way in which the pandemic might bring out might bring in short-term changes that then become long-term.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the very important question. I think it's also a very important question for policymakers in China now. As you know, Sino joint programs are very popular in China, especially in the current situation. I think more and more students will choose Sino-Foreign joint programs. I think because of the COVID-19, more and more teachers, students, parents, and policymakers, their evaluation and their impression of online learning is improved very much. I think before, many teachers are very doubtful of online learning quality. But because of the experience of online learning for several months, totally online learning experience, many teachers and students know that online learning sometimes is even better than off-site class teaching. So I think it will change. But the problem is that I think people are more acceptable to hybrid or blended learning model. I think that totally online learning is not very acceptable now, especially because the government they have a very strong quality assurance mechanisms about joint programs. If it's totally online learning, I think it will be very difficult for them to get approved or get accreditation in China. So I think my point is that a blended learning may be a trend, but totally online learning is not maybe in the near future, several years is not possible, I think. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I entirely agree.
Thanks to you both. I was going to bring in Sang Feng Miao, but his question is also for Wenqin. So perhaps we can bring in Joyce Lau to ask a question of Aki Yonezawa. Hello, Joyce, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I was just wondering if there were some positive lessons that could be learned from Japan, because it seems to have kind of more of a balance. As you say, you didn't have a really hard crackdown, but you didn't have the sort of very high COVID rates we saw in the West either. I was just wondering if there were lessons to be learned from Japan.
Thank you very much. Probably the Japan and the other East Asian countries has relatively good condition, partly because that we have some experience of some emergency before this pandemic. So the South Korea, the Hong Kong experienced the surge as a very big issue, and so they are much more used to the for example, PCR testing. In case of Japan, no, but we have some the experience of the earthquake and tsunami in about 9 years ago. So we are much more used to how to deal with and how to collaborate as a society to deal with such an emergency. So then under this condition, the government is relatively transparent, and then they try to persuade the people that what kind of behavior, such as the drinking, is dangerous or party is dangerous. So some information is shown by the evidence, and the university academics contributed a lot on this process. And then also basically some voluntary based collaboration between the universities and the society. We try to persuade the students that the students actually not many people has a very serious problem even if they are infected, but they are becoming carrier of the virus, and then that will attack to the old people, including the professors. So that these mechanisms are relatively well informed, and then shared among the people, and that this was possible because of partly because of the high level of the collaboration of the schooling and also the university. I hope that I answered to your question partly.
Well, thanks to you both. I again apologize the same thing, because I'd like to direct a question to Zane if we can. Can we bring in Lan Nguyen to ask her question, please? I think you need to turn on your microphone.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Lan Anh. I'm from Vietnam. I'm currently a PhD student in education at the University of Auckland, New Zealand. So my questions for Professor Azman. What's the most important implications she would like to share to neighboring countries in ASEAN region like Vietnam? From her very interesting critical analysis research of Malaysian higher education institution responses to COVID-19. So as a neighboring country, we would like to learn the lesson from critical research of Professor Azman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nguyen. Am I on?
You are.
Okay. Yes, there are two things that I'd like to highlight, basically the implications of COVID-19 to Malaysia, and I think it would be quite similar to the context of South Asian countries, is that the challenges of the accelerated use of technology actually created quite a lot of issues, and is a steep learning curve for a lot of higher education institutions in Malaysia. So if you see from my PowerPoint here, there's quite a lot of issues in terms of digital divide, inequity. In terms of inequity, a lot of students, more than 40%, couldn't afford it. Access is limited. That shows that, you know, despite us being a developing country, there is still, you know, that segregation, or, you know, dividing the poor and the rich from getting education through online learning. And also from reports, students have said that they are not very satisfied with the remote learning that is going on. I mean, you know, we just had to go into it without, you know, proper timing, proper preparation. And actually, what the implication is that some of the strategic policies has not really worked well. Although the higher education, including the education policy plans, have jumped into the bandwagon of fourth industrial revolution, where everything needs to be online. A lot of students should, register for online learning, blended learning. But in real, actual fact, the country, especially in the selected areas of the interior part of Malaysia, is not ready with the proper infrastructure for online learning. Some universities do not even have, a proper learning management system, infrastructure that can actually continue with online learning until the end of the year. So a lot of lessons learned. And I think if the implication is, even if the policy is there by the Ministry of Higher Education, if it's not supported by other ministries who provide all these infrastructure, it's not going to be possible for us to continue and actually be fair to the people who do not have access or who can afford it. I would like to say that one thing that I believe for some people is that perhaps COVID-19 actually increases people's appreciation for face-to-face learning. The traditional campus, because I think parents have spent a lot of money to send their children. I would love my children to go to university, engage with their friends and things like that, rather than being stuck, in front of the computer. I think it's good for them to have that journey in the university with face-to-face blended learning, in campus. So I think that's one. The other one, Simon, if you allow me to actually go into the implication for higher education, is what we've learned, and is that higher education for public good and social change is a necessity. I mean, it is coming back. It's not too late, I think, but we need to look into this seriously. The public sector has become more important, better late than never. Public university is the guardian of public goods, and we can see that during COVID-19, public education, media institutions, of course, the hospitals, the education, the health institutions have been viewed much more favorably than the private counterparts. So as a developing country, when we were trying to develop a lot of private institutions, private corporate entities and so on, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that the public domain are still very important, and COVID-19 has taught us that. I think my other friends would probably like to share other implications, but I think another one that is very important is that it? Okay, that's. Thank you.
I mean, we've moved more over time than we usually do, but
right.
It's been a very good discussion. And I wonder if we could close it by me posing a question to each of you, which will mean you can make a closing statement.
Mm-hmm.
We now know a lot more about the pandemic and higher education than we did. When the virus it was clear that it was going to be a worldwide problem in February, March, a lot of people thought in terms of a 2 or 3 month or 3 or 4 month shutdown, and then somehow things would spring back. And we know we've got a 2 or 3 year problem on our hands here, and we know a lot more about online learning, and we know a lot more about what our institutions and our teachers, our administrators can and can't do, what our students can and can't do, and so on. If we're starting again now, knowing what we know now, can you give me one thing that you think your country, your higher education system should have done differently? One thing that could have been done better, differently. And that, Zaini, I might ask you first, because we'll go in the order of the speakers.
probably taking seriously some of the policies that have been there for a long time, to be very serious with starting with blended learning, online learning, and very serious with research that has implication for social impact. I think that's, one of the two things that I think we've learned at the moment, and also gathering data for the use of the university. Because when COVID-19 happened, people struggled to get data on, how many students are without laptops or have problems with getting internet and things like that. So research should also be used for institutional management, institutional development. I think if we have kept data, then it would have been easier. And of course, the other one is being very serious with online or blended. Simon?
Thank you, Zani. Wenqin, what do you think? One thing we could have done differently and better?
One thing we should do in China is to provide some teacher training before online teaching. Because in China, I think more than 80%, even in Tsinghua University, more than 80% of our faculty members do not have any experience of online teaching before the pandemic. So, but they have to teach online without experience. So, so in this situation, the quality of online learning is not very good at the beginning. So I think if we can do it again, I think we have teacher training on how to teach online course. It's very different from the traditional teaching pedagogy skills. Yeah, I think that's what we have to do. Yeah,
that
again,
makes sense. It's probably the most important single thing, isn't it? Yeah. Aki, what are your thoughts? One thing we could have done better.
Thank you very much. So what we are now experiencing yesterday as a replacement of the new inviting the new prime minister is that before that the national policy was highly influenced by the minister, the people of the Ministry of the Economy and Trade and Industry. Means that the economic policy does really gives the influence to the university, like innovation, but also to soften the policy or confuse the policy to control everything. So that maybe we can have a much more straightforward, more consistent approach towards the control or the challenge with the virus. And it was not realized. So now I'm not sure that the new prime minister can do that, but obviously we need to have clear the action. But at the same time, after that we have to think seriously about what is the meaning of the academic freedom and the university autonomy. That is still not discussed yet. Thank you.
Yes, I think those control and autonomy issues in some countries are going to linger on after the pandemic is over, especially as the recession is likely to raise a lot of questions about higher education in the context of graduate employment, although Japan maybe handles that better than most countries. Colleagues, that was great discussion. Thank you very much for your participation. Really valuable to have all three people and all three countries in this discussion. And this will be a webinar where there's three presentations and the answers to the questions will be looked at on YouTube, I think, in the next few years. So thank you very, very much. And we'll hopefully have all three of you back on together or separately in our webinar program. Let me invite you all to take part in our next webinar on Tuesday, where we move to a country with considerably more problems than those we've been looking at, and that's India. And we've got three outstanding presenters to talk to us about India: Jyoti Arora, Soman Chattopadhyay, and who was in today's webinar, and Rupa Manjari Ghosh, who's the Vice Chancellor. So we look forward to that discussion, and we hope that the 100 people who tuned in today will tune in again then next Tuesday and in subsequent webinars. Bye for now. Thank you very much.